core values to valued culture. Here is your host, Will Scott, interviewing another CEO about leading culture in their company.
Welcome to another Culture Czars interview, where we talk to CEOs that care about corporate culture. We call this series From Core Values to Valued Culture, and our purpose is to help CEOs create environments where employees love where they work and why they work. My guest today is Scott Silver, President at Printable Promotions. Hi, Scott.
Good morning.
How are things today?
Everything's great. Beautiful snowy day in Chicago.
Good. Well, thank you for coming on the Culture Czars podcast. I know we're going to be talking about Printable Promotions today. Tell us a little bit about them.
Printable Promotions is essentially an ad agency where we focus on promotional items, so custom logo merchandise. Generally, we find out where the client is trying to go with their brand and then help suggest product ideas and ways to bring them to market, whether it be trade show giveaways, employee recognition gifts, and things of the like.
Okay. And how's the business doing?
It's doing well in its 25th year.
Oh, congratulations.
So very proud of our longevity. And as you know, I've actually exited daily operations about 3 years ago. So it is sustaining well on its own without my daily direction.
And how was that possible?
Well, that's a question that might take a while to answer back at the beginning. But the shorter version is really just that we built an environment that is sustainable once I left, because everything was in place, that employees knew sort of how things worked. It started way back when I started the company sophomore year, second semester when I was in university, out of my fraternity room. And worked on that for my time in college, and by senior year, I had an office. At the time, it was called Party Madness, and our genius tagline, because we were producing party favors for fraternity and sorority events and other student groups around campus. It was called Party Madness, and our tagline was "Let us do you a favor." I know, genius. Yeah. So muddled through that, and then after college. Wanted to get into more corporate work, so changed the name to Printable Promotions, and kind of went from there.
Well, it obviously worked well, but a classic story there for an entrepreneur. And how you obviously talked about, you built an environment, but presumably I think you were going to say an environment that allowed you to basically still be an owner in the business, but perhaps do something different with your life, which sounds like every entrepreneur's dream. Yeah.
So the history of it, muddled through the early years. Again, I never worked for anybody else, so I have no resume, which I'm proud of. And so for 5 years or so, sort of went through it on my own. Always profitable, but sort of slow going. My brother was in corporate America, and after 5 years, he was tired of traveling in his work, and I, made him an offer to come on and see if we could work together. Always a fun undertaking, family members working together. And we sort of, I guess I would say, muddled through that too for another approximately 5 years, until around 2006, when we sat down and we said, we need to deliberately figure out what we're doing here. What do we want to be as a company? Where are we doing this? And that was definitely the game changer. I can, remember it specifically. About a year's, worth of work and transition time on it. In the very beginning, it was facilitated, a bit by an outside source, but then we mostly sort of ran with it and built it internally. But we sat down and said, what do we want this place to look like? And sort of drew it up, visually, and ultimately put it in writing. What does the company look like? What does the culture look like? What does the sales team look like? How are we perceived in the industry? What do we want to be? And that's when the magic started to happen.
Awesome. You know what? I was listening to an audiobook on leadership actually this morning in the car, and it's by Warren Bennis. And one of the first things he talked about in terms of leadership was vision, and having a vision, And I guess you just described exactly that. You began by painting a vision of what you wanted the company to be like in the future, and then executed that, and now you're enjoying the benefits.
Yeah, exactly. And the specifics along the way we can certainly talk about. But ultimately, yeah, 3 years ago, I had reached my personal financial independence goal. And every time I would stand up, my knees would crack a little bit. And I said, it's time, before everything goes, get out there and hit some of my personal goals related to travel. So yeah, the last 3 years have been a blessing and a travel focus. Only made available because the transition of me, slowly stepping down and a lot of employee tenure. So the employees sort of knew what to expect. It was really an employee-driven sort of environment. And my brother was able to take over the helm. He was very integral into building it along the way, of course, as well. But the transition was smooth only because of those things.
Okay, nice. And so let's start talking about culture. You said you designed a vision, you designed, what the company would look like, a sales team. I mean, how did you design culture? What did you use to do that?
So, I mean, it was a process of just really describing what it felt like, and sometimes it was just the very beginning, simple, like, are you going to be wearing suits or are you going to be wearing t-shirts? Oh, t-shirts for sure. And then
Especially
you
in the
just
printable
yeah,
promotions
right.
game.
But still, as just that's who I wanted to be. That's where I wanted to work. That's where my brother wanted to work. That's what we wanted it to feel like. We wanted it to be fun. We wanted to build that into it. We wanted, we just sort of talked through all the things, work-life balance and things like it. And ultimately we came up with this specific in writing where it landed, and I can read that at just about a minute long if that's okay. But I think it really sets the stage for what we wanted it to look like.
Look,
Um,
yeah, would love that. Please share that.
yeah, so the culture, we have a comfortable, casual, fun, exciting, and competitive adult to adult culture. You often see people dancing to celebrate a win. The environment fosters personal responsibility, resourcefulness, and respectful, direct, honest, and immediate communication between all team members. Internally, we have minimal employment policies because our shared common goal is all we need to guide the right people riding with us on the bus. We provide growth opportunities for employees not only through traditional career paths, but also by a willingness to create new positions if necessary. For an employee's personal growth, we are eager to invest in continuing education. For all members of management, we encourage regular training in the areas of leadership, communication, and team building. Work-life balance is encouraged, and when possible, the company offers the freedom to work from home and keep flexible work hours. We are open to employee feedback on how to continually improve. We encourage all team members to provide input or strategies on how we can win more often. So once seeing that in writing, through that process, the clarity was amazing.
And tell me more about the amazing part. I mean, what did you see happening? Have you got any
Sure, we
stories for?
started.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we started holding ourselves accountable to creating that culture. We also, that as well as the overview and the other things related to what we want the company to look like, the people and everything. It's all in a one-page vision document that is laminated, and every employee has that at their desk. So we are all working from the same game plan. We all want that to be that. When people are hired, they look at that, and we decide, hey, is that somewhere you want to be? Is that something you believe in? Are those in line with your values? And if it is, amongst 8 other hoops that they jump through for hiring, which we can get into, it really sets the stage and opens the clarity to, if you want to be part of that, come aboard.
That's great. Now, I guess you expressed a lot of values in that statement, but did you actually have core values defined as well?
Yeah, we did, and we take that very seriously as well, and do a bunch of things to keep that alive every day. Yeah, we have be resourceful, dependable, and continuously learning. Do whatever it takes with minimal direction. Be efficient and responsive to customer needs and requests. Take an active role in the company. Take personal responsibility, and have fun and show passion.
Let's start with. They sound awesome, by the way. Let's start with how did you come? How did you come up with those?
Well, I don't remember the exact process per se. Again, that is 15 years ago now plus. But somewhere in there was everybody contributing, what they thought our values, should be. And in the beginning, I'm quite certain there was probably 20. And we had to, get a little deeper into each one and see if there was, many times there's ways you can combine multiple ones because you're saying the same thing in different ways. But ultimately you can narrow it down to those handful. And then, it's you can read it the first time and not know exactly what it's going to feel like in actuality. But then as you bring it to the organization and you implement, things start to become a little bit more clear. For example, every employee fills out a quarterly success plan, or QSP, because if it has an acronym, it's way cooler.
Okay.
In it, they, amongst other things, they list one or two of the core values that they want to focus on for the quarter. And then they, might write the outcome being like show 5 times when they exhibited, that core value. Now, they're not ignoring the other 4 of the 5 values, but they're just saying this is one I want to focus on. Because if you got, too many goals, you have none. So that's one way we do it. And then more interestingly, I found that I'm a huge proponent of efficiencies and simplicities. So if I can build culture and it can happen on its own, even better. So what we do is once a month, there's a alias, email address that anybody at the company can send a nomination to. And in order to nominate one of your coworkers, you must use one of the core values in your nomination. For example, so-and-so was doing whatever it takes when they, drove that order across town, in the snow, giving, real life examples of what they did, or, a specific example of how they, won over a client or treated them properly, or, took on something at work that they didn't have to, taking an active role in the company, core value. And so they nominate, so they send those in, and anyone can nominate. You can nominate as many people as you want. You just have to do that. And then at the monthly meeting, somebody reads aloud all of the nominations. So you have public praise, well-earned, from your coworkers happening. And maybe, 10, 12, 15, 20 people could be nominated or things. And then everybody hears that, and then they vote anonymously on who they think the employee of the month should be. So it's not ownership. It's not one specific, manager saying, "Oh, I think this person." It's not there's no politics. It's just, here it is. So everybody hears the praise. Everybody hears what somebody else is doing. They might not be in their department, so they might not even be aware of how well this person is doing. But when they hear the nomination, they can get a feel for all the good things happening around the company, and then they, of course, do that. And they get to hold the trophy at their desk, of course. And each year we do a different theme. Maybe it's a rock and roll theme and we have a guitar in the office. Well, if you win, you sign the guitar and you get to keep that by your desk. And then, maybe an Amazon gift card or something fun comes with it.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. I always encourage CEOs to not just have core values. I have this thing where a lot of people just put the words on the wall. They've got the poster up, but that's as far as they go with it. And they expect it then magically the culture to align with the poster. But you've got to, I like to say that you've got to bring them alive, make them thrive, and then use them to drive performance. And one of the big things about making them thrive is exactly a nomination process along the lines of what you have. Mm-hmm. And I like that. So you have an alias email where people can nominate. And are they meeting every month or every week on this?
Well, we meet, departments might meet weekly for more specific things to them, but this is a monthly thing.
all company meeting.
All company meeting.
Yeah. And of course, the very important part, as you said, is not just to say who got the award, but to tell this story, which then goes a little bit into the folklore and kind of emphasizes that core value for everybody else. And there may be new employees who now are hearing these things and realizing, oh, okay, that's what that is meant by that value. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And then you mentioned a voting process. So how do people vote?
Oh, we just have them scribble a person's name on a paper and put it into a hat.
And that's
at the
happening.
meeting.
And that happens at the meeting, and then the
Yep.
winner is picked out. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then just somebody takes the hat and starts tallying, the numbers per person, and person with the most ones. Yep, there you go.
Okay.
Very simple, efficient,
Yeah. Very cool.
effective.
How many
My
employees do you
favorite
have,
parts.
by the way?
Yeah, so we have currently 12 employees, but we had 24 employees, and I'm glad you asked that because we had 24 employees right around when we were starting to figure out the vision and the values and moving forward. And part of the reason we did it was like we were hiring because employees said we're so busy. We were just hiring because they had too many things to do. Well, the main focus of the vision values concept was also in conjunction with making ourselves a results-based management company, and that was, a game changer for sure. So once we got that in place, all the employees who wanted to win and were up for it, and the transparency didn't scare them, really, really thrived. And then slowly over about a year or so, wrong employees slowly self-selected, which was perfect. They went to where they, needed to go. And there was even some cases where people would leave for unrelated work reasons. Maybe they got married and had moved out of town. And then we just took a hard look at their job and what it entailed and what results we needed from that job. And it turned out that you could get those results a lot quicker and maybe didn't need to rehire that exact position. So that was amazing. We had 2 production managers that were managing around 1,500 orders a year. And once we got laser focused on the results that were needed from that role, we now have 1 person managing almost twice those amount of orders. So that happened from clearly defining the outcome and not about activity, right? We never want to we never want to confuse activity with achievement. Actually, most of our employees now have been with us 5 years or more. I have one employee, for example, that when I had the company and University of Illinois in Champaign, she was an artist at one of the factories that I worked with. And so when I moved the company up to Chicago and I suggested maybe she should join me, we had such a nice relationship that she said yes before I could even tell her what I could afford to pay her. She's now been with the company 21 years. She's now the operations manager.
Very cool. And can you think of any particular story about her from her service that represents, your core values, where she did something or she showed somebody, a way of? Can you think of anything?
Yeah. So be resourceful, dependable, and continuous learning comes to mind. She was a talented artist at the time, and now she's operations manager. Obviously, she has learned a ton of new skills along the way, and almost all of it is self-taught and her being resourceful. She learned how to do some coding because she was now working on some back-end work on our website even.
Amazing.
At a time, things like that. Yeah. So she's sort of become the jack of all trades and, figures it out. And all the employees, but they really value this results-based culture and the clarity to it all. So they want to win and they want to learn. And they know that it'll be appreciated.
Yeah. And I'm sure they're using the core values. I mean, if they're using nominations, are they also using those verbally during the day and just, acknowledging people that are doing it or using those words as a way of correcting their behaviors?
Yeah, they will. And they'll have fun with it, too. Most importantly, they'll be like, at a meeting, we need somebody to do something. They might raise their hand and say, I'll do it. I'll take an active role in the company, specifically say it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So that's one sign that I like to see that, people are actually, that they are alive and thriving and not just platitudes, that employees find it very easy to be cynical about.
Right.
Yeah. And then what about the recruitment and hiring side of things? Do you kind of attempt to hire for fit with culture? Yeah.
So we specifically hire for aptitude and attitude. That's sort of the way that we say it. We're a little bit interested in your prior experience, but if you have those 2 things, you'll probably fit in and succeed. So have a bunch of hoops that we have them jump through. And the more hoops that they jump through on the hiring side, I think that significantly contributes to their longevity with the company. I think there's a direct correlation there. If you go through a lot of hoops and you finally make it and you get hired, you feel really good that you are in a place that doesn't just let anybody work here. You also feel really good that all of the coworkers you're going to be working with went through those very same hoops. So you're all on the same page. There's a lot of transparency to it. After all those hoops, before the hiring, they go out to lunch with a couple of the team members, 2 or 3, without the owners, and they get it straight. They get the straight story. Please, we encourage them, ask anything and everything. You are going to do all of us a disservice, by leaving something that's important to you unasked, because you might find it out a month or 2 later, and you've invested your time and we've invested our time training, and let's just figure this thing out. So so they're given the vision to read both, straight through the whole page. They see the values. We do a Wonderlic intelligence test. We do we do an online test related to temperament and motivation. We do top grading interviews, which are quite lengthy. They can be 3-4 hours, and to try and diagnose their past trends of successes they've had and sort of who they are, and lunch with the coworkers, and onboarding process as well.
Yeah. And what about unhiring folks? Have you? I mean, I'm sure you have at some point, but in the last 5 years, for example, you mentioned that sort of time for most of your employees. Perhaps you're not even having to do a lot of hiring these days because you've got a good, stable force that is fitting with culture. But what about the unhiring situation? Any stories there where, particularly if they apply to people that just weren't fitting with the vibe and the culture?
Yeah, and yes, so I'll go into that. They when you have the clear goals defined, people will quickly, I guess, self-select. Okay, how many times can you show up to a meeting, the company meeting, and say, see those goals that we all agreed upon and clearly defined? I didn't do it. Next month, I didn't do it. They choose to leave because there's clarity to that their performance is not there. If all the things related to it aren't clearly defined, then there's a he said, she said, it's a very childish communication. It's very adult to adult when you have all the things clearly defined. So there's definitely been some, and that, including the core values. Again, the quarterly success plan. You meet with your coach. We don't use the words managers. You meet with your coach at the end of the quarter. This is how the meeting goes. The employee walks in and the coach says, so how did you do? That's all the coach has to say. So how did you do? And then they go through and they said, well, I said I was going to do this, and this is where I landed here. I did this. This is where I landed related to, I said I was going to do these things related to core values. Here's the 3 of the, I only did 3 of the 5. And, so they're proud of the ones that they achieved, and take personal responsibility for the ones that they didn't. And, 95% of the time, employees that didn't hit their goal will either make the proper adjustments to hit it the next quarter, or they'll choose to leave. Only 5% try and stay when they're obviously not meeting goals. So when you ask about unhiring, it's only a few percentage that you have to generally physically say, we're going to let you move on.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely spot on. Really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. And as we come to kind of towards the end of the time here, what of all the things that you've perhaps shared, or perhaps something you haven't shared yet, what other thing would you want the listeners to really take on board about, if they care as we do, Scott, about not simply having core values, but truly having a valued culture?
Well, firstly is, take the time, maybe utilize an outside source just so you can get out of your own way. But if you commit to it, you'll bring it internally, soon enough. I like to think of culture as consciously building an environment, and a team that wants to win, and then together with them, clearly defining what the wins look like.
Yeah, that's one thing that clearly comes through in terms of the way you lead the company is not just about having a culture, but it's a very performance-driven. You've talked about doing the same amount of work, with 12 people almost as you were doing with 24 people.
Revenue was the same.
You've talked about your was it QSP, your
quarterly success plan.
Quarterly success plans. People come in and before you start reporting on them, they're reporting on themselves at those quarterly reviews in terms of how did they do. And I'm sure you've got a lot of numbers that you're managing people to as well in an efficiency, mindful way.
Yes, we do have KPIs, and those are key performance indicators, and those are on the top of the quarterly success plan listing as well. And, the word success has always been an interesting one for me. I hear people often throw around the idea of, oh, so-and-so, yeah, she's very successful. He's very successful. They're very successful. Well, I don't really know what that means until you show me their goal sheet and their intended outcomes that they were looking for. A lot of times the word success is thrown around. Somebody's successful because they made money. I don't know, that seems to be one. But maybe they missed all of their kids' soccer games. I don't know. I need to know how they were defining it before I say that they're successful. So each employee is defining what success means to them, and their coach is validating whether that's in line with the numbers and the culture itself at the company. And if so, they're off and running, and it's theirs to achieve their goals or raise their hand for the need for additional resources to get there.
Cool. Well, it definitely sounds like you've got a team there of people that really are loving where they work and loving who they're working with. If somebody wants to get some printable products from your company, how do they do that?
They can go to printablepromotions.com.
Okay. And just fill out the form there or make an inquiry there?
Yeah, fill out a contact form would work, and they'll be assigned somebody that will ask them a few questions and then get them targeted product recommendations.
Okay. Well,
sorry, one last thing. We are also very proud of the Best Places to Work Awards, which we've won 5 of. And most recently ended up in the number 1 spot in our industry for the small business division. And that's, to me, that's the most the award that I'm the most proud of, because that's where people spend 8 hours a day. Whether they're in the office or working remote, it's something that you created that they want to be part of.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Boy, thank you for mentioning that. So, yes, 5-time winner of Best Places to Work. And in one of the occasions in your industry, the number 1 spot for small businesses. That's amazing. And clearly that is the evidence of the culture that you've created there.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for sharing your wisdom and your success. And definitely think there's some nuggets here for our listeners. So really appreciate that a lot.
My pleasure. Enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at culturezars.com, and we'll see you next time.